The winter sun spilled softly through the curtains of her Brentwood home, casting golden light over the quiet room. Betty White sat in her favorite chair by the window, the same spot where she had watched so many sunsets with Alan Ludden, her great love, gone for half a century. At 99, her hands were frail, her voice soft, but her eyes, those bright, mischievous eyes, still shimmered with warmth. The world outside was waiting to celebrate her 100th birthday. Magazines had already gone to print, interviews were scheduled, and tributes were being written. But inside that house, Betty seemed to know something no one else did. She was smiling, as if she'd already seen the next sunrise, one that belonged to another world. Her longtime assistant later said she spent that morning laughing, talking to old friends on the phone. There was no fear in her voice, no sadness, only gratitude. "I've had the love of a good man," she told a friend, "and I've had laughter. What more do you need?" As the afternoon light faded, she closed her eyes and whispered something no one heard completely. Some say it sounded like a name, Alan. Others believe it was a prayer. Perhaps it was both. There was no struggle, no last breath heavy with regret. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels like a soft curtain falling at the end of a long, beautiful play. Betty White didn't die with sorrow. She drifted, peacefully, gracefully, into the arms of the man she'd been missing for 50 years. And in that final moment, Hollywood's brightest light became something quieter, gentler. A star that didn't fade but simply went home. Long before she was America's beloved Golden Girl, Betty White was just a shy kid from Oak Park, Illinois, born in 1922, the daughter of an electrical engineer and a homemaker who adored animals. The family wasn't wealthy, but their small home was always filled with laughter, stray dogs, and the smell of her mother's cooking. It was there, around the dinner table, that Betty first learned what humor could do, how it could fill silence, mend hearts, and turn sadness into something lighter. But her childhood wasn't all joy. When the Great Depression hit, her father lost his job. The family packed what little they owned and moved to California, chasing a new start. Betty was only a teenager, but she understood what struggle meant. She watched her parents' quiet resilience, the way they smiled even when bills piled up. It was there that she learned her first great truth. Kindness is the only wealth that never runs out. In school, she wasn't the prettiest or the most popular. She was awkward, talkative, and sometimes too honest for her own good. But she had something that set her apart: timing. Even as a young girl, she could sense when a room needed laughter, and she could deliver it with a tilt of her head, a raised eyebrow, a perfectly timed pause. After graduation, Betty dreamed of being a forest ranger. But at the time, women weren't allowed in that profession. So, she later said with a grin, I went into something even wilder: show business. Her first jobs were small: singing on the radio, reading commercials, doing voice work. But her spirit was big. Every rejection only fueled her determination. If they didn't laugh the first time, she'd tell herself, I'll make them laugh the next. Behind the humor, though, there was always a quiet loneliness. Her father's long work hours, her mother's gentle but worried smile, the uncertainty of the world outside. All of it made her cling to joy like it was oxygen. And maybe that's why, even decades later, Betty White didn't just perform happiness. She believed in it. She built her life on the same foundation that held her family together during those dark years: faith, laughter, and the unshakable idea that no matter how hard life gets, you can always find something to smile about. Betty White's career didn't begin with fame. It began with persistence. In the 1940s, Hollywood was still a man's world. Studios preferred young starlets who looked the part, not women who made people laugh. When Betty walked into her first auditions, producers told her she was too sweet, too cute, and that comedy wasn't a woman's business. She smiled, thanked them politely, and came back the next week anyway. Her first big break came in the early days of live television, those black and white broadcasts where mistakes were common and charm mattered more than glamour. Betty had both. She could make an audience laugh even when a camera malfunctioned or a co-star forgot a line. Viewers fell in love with that sparkle in her eye, that sense that she was in on the joke, and that life itself was one long, unpredictable sketch. In 1953, Life with Elizabeth made her a household name. She wasn't just the star, she was also one of the first women in America to produce her own television show, a quiet revolution that went unnoticed at the time. In an era when women were expected to smile and follow, Betty led. Through the decades, she reinvented herself over and over again, from the Mary Tyler Moore Show to the Golden Girls to Hot in Cleveland. Each role felt like a new layer of her personality, sharp wit wrapped in warmth, a fearless spirit hidden behind a grandmother's grin. Her timing was surgical, her humor disarming. She didn't compete with anyone. She just was. But behind the laughter, there was pain. The loss of her husband, Alan Ludden, in 1981 nearly broke her. They had shared a love story written in laughter. He adored her mind as much as her mischief. When he passed, she said she'd never remarry. "Once you've had the best," she whispered, "who needs the rest?" She poured that love, that grief into her work. Every joke, every punchline, every pause carried a piece of that ache. The ache of a woman who had lost her person, but never lost her joy. Her co-stars often said that when the cameras stopped rolling, she'd quietly feed stray dogs outside the studio, or send handwritten notes to crew members who were having a bad day. She didn't need to perform kindness. She was kindness. By the time she reached her 80s, she was no longer just a comedian. She was an institution. Awards, tributes, magazine covers. None of it changed her. When asked how she wanted to be remembered, she smiled and said, "I just hope they remember that I made them laugh, and that I meant it." Betty White's fire wasn't loud. It didn't roar. It glowed, steady, golden, and gentle. And long after the laughter faded, that warmth would keep millions alive. In her later years, Betty White became something beyond fame. She became comfort itself. Her presence on television was like sunlight breaking through a storm, familiar, steady, and healing. But even as she continued to make the world laugh, her own life was slowing down. The friends she had once shared the screen with, Mary Tyler Moore, Rue McClanahan, Estelle Getty, were gone. Hollywood had changed. The world had changed. And yet there she was, still standing, still smiling, still thanking the audience every time they applauded. Privately, though, time had begun to whisper in her ear. Her eyesight weakened, her steps grew slower, and the long days felt heavier. Still, she refused to let age define her. "I have a simple rule," she told a reporter at 95. "Keep busy, keep kind, and don't stop laughing, especially at yourself." After Alan Ludden's death, she never remarried. For more than 40 years, she lived with his photo beside her bed, talking to him every night. "We had 40 years less than we deserved," she once said. "But I'd rather have 40 with him than 100 with anyone else." Those who visited her home said it felt like stepping into a memory. Walls lined with pictures, shelves filled with awards, and always the sound of dogs padding across the floor. Her love for animals had become her other great legacy. She supported shelters, sanctuaries, and charities quietly, often sending checks without signing her name. As the years passed, her body began to betray her, but her mind remained sharp. When asked if she was afraid of dying, she shook her head. "No," she said softly. "My husband's waiting. I'm just not in a hurry." Yet even with her humor intact, loneliness crept in. Many of her closest friends were gone. Her family, nieces, nephews, and her devoted assistant, became her circle. The pandemic isolated her further, keeping her from the fans and the world that had always been her oxygen. But she adapted. "You can't let sadness steal your days," she told a friend on the phone. "I still have more smiles to give." Those final years were not tragic. They were peaceful. Betty spent them surrounded by her animals, her memories, and the quiet hum of a life fully lived. She still woke up early, still fed the birds outside her kitchen window, still thanked the morning sun. But sometimes in the quiet of the evening, she would look toward the sky and whisper a name, Alan. And in that whisper was everything, the laughter, the longing, the life that had been so full it could only end in stillness. The world saw a legend. She, however, saw herself as simply a woman who got lucky. Lucky to love, to laugh, to live this long. But even luck can't hold back the clock. And soon the light that had made the world laugh for nearly a century began to flicker softly, not fading, but preparing to rest. In the final weeks of her life, Betty White's home in Brentwood became quieter than ever before. A place where time seemed to move slower, where every sound, every breath, every ray of sunlight mattered. Christmas had just passed, and the world outside was already preparing for her 100th birthday celebration. Magazines had printed special issues. Television networks were planning retrospectives. Fans were ready to honor the woman who had made them laugh for nearly a century. But inside that peaceful house, Betty White wasn't thinking about parties, fame, or headlines. She was thinking about love and endings. Her assistant, who had been by her side for decades, said she woke up each morning smiling. "I'm still here," she would say softly. "That means I have one more day to be grateful." She ate breakfast with her favorite music playing, Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, and sometimes Alan Ludden's old recordings from Password. Every now and then, she'd close her eyes and whisper, "I can still hear him." She spent those days surrounded by photographs of her parents, her friends, her co-stars, and of course, Alan. His face was everywhere. "He's still the love of my life," she once said. "Always will be." When visitors came, she greeted them with humor. "I can't die yet," she joked. "I have a 100th birthday party to crash." But when they left, she would look at the door a little longer, as if she knew that goodbye might be forever. There was no grand speech, no dramatic farewell. Betty's last wish was simple, that people keep laughing. "Don't mourn me," she told a close friend. "Just make someone smile today. That's what I'd want." Her health began to decline gently, like a candle dimming in soft wind. She grew weaker but never bitter. "You can't be angry at time," she said once. "It gave me everything." On December 31st, 2021, the final morning of the year, Betty White passed away peacefully in her sleep. There was no pain, no fear. She had lived 99 years and 17 days short of her centennial, but perhaps she didn't need to reach 100. Maybe she'd already done it in spirit. Her assistant found her just as she had been the night before. Calm, her face relaxed, a faint smile still on her lips. Near her chair was a framed photo of Alan Ludden. It was turned slightly toward her, as if he had been waiting. News of her death rippled through the world like a wave of heartbreak. People wept not just because she was gone, but because she had been good, rare, kind, genuine. President Joe Biden called her a cultural icon who brought generations of Americans together with her humor and heart. But those who knew her best said her final message wasn't in words, it was in her life itself. A reminder that joy isn't found in fame or wealth or youth. It's found in gratitude, in laughter, in loving someone so deeply that even death feels like a reunion. Betty White didn't fear her final moment. She had spent 99 years making the world a little brighter. And when her time came, she simply turned toward the light she had always carried within her. After Betty White's passing, the world didn't simply mourn, it paused. For a woman who had spent a lifetime making others laugh, her absence felt like a silence that stretched across every living room, every rerun, every memory. Fans placed flowers outside her Hollywood Walk of Fame star. Some left handwritten notes that read, "Thank you for the laughter." Others brought dog toys and treats, small tributes to her lifelong devotion to animals. Television networks replayed her greatest moments, the sharp humor of The Mary Tyler Moore Show, the timeless grace of The Golden Girls, and her infectious joy in interviews where she'd tease, flirt, and laugh until everyone else joined in. Even in death, she made people smile. Her final wish, that people keep laughing, became a movement. Social media overflowed with posts tagged "Turn on our Usher Be Like Betty," each one a story of kindness. Strangers paying for each other's coffee, volunteering at shelters, forgiving old grudges. Her legacy wasn't confined to Hollywood. It lived in every act of compassion that rippled outward from her life. Animal shelters she had quietly supported began receiving record donations. Some renamed adoption drives in her honor, the Betty White Challenge. Tens of thousands of pets found homes because of her. A fitting tribute to a woman who had once said, "You can always tell a person's heart by how they treat animals." At home, her friends and family gathered in small circles. They didn't hold a grand funeral. Betty wouldn't have wanted that. Instead, they toasted her with champagne and laughter. "She'd kill us if we cried," one of them said. "So let's laugh loud enough that she hears us." And maybe she did. Because sometimes, late at night, when reruns of the Golden Girls play, and that familiar theme song fills the room, "Thank you for being a friend," it feels as though Betty is still here, still smiling, still reminding us that joy is a choice and that kindness never ages. In a world that can be cruel, she proved that gentleness could be power. In a business built on pretending, she showed that authenticity could be eternal. Betty White didn't just live long, she lived well. And long after her laughter has faded from the airwaves, her warmth will linger, quietly echoing in the simple, beautiful truths she left behind. If you can make someone smile today, you've done something right.